That famous line about we'll get someone tough out here, we'll get a Queenslander, because I knew Greg Ritchie was in next. I knew that would have the desired effect, and a few major expletives later, directed back at me, I knew I'd press the right buttons.
The ailing Jones almost retired at 170, but decided to keep going and became the first Australian to score a Test double century in India.
I cannot remember going into the dressing rooms at 200, 202 not out at tea. I can't remember anything.
By the time he came in, I think 202 not out at tea time, he was like a corpse.
Every time he came off the field, we had assigned players to do certain things for Dino. As he came through, the cap would be taken off, his gloves would be removed, his pads would be removed, someone else would take off his shirts and there'd be an ice bath waiting for him.
We would do that and basically just shove him out the door and say, Dino, go, you're off again. And somehow he would click back in, but as he went on, his eyes started to draw out and draw out and draw out.
I was still batting when he was dismissed at 210, so I just thought, oh, well, what a fantastic knock, and we're getting to that point where we're in a very impregnable position in this game.
I remember when I got out, I got bowled and walked off the ground, that I was put in a bath, an ice bath, full of ice, just water. And I just hopped in this bath and I had a Fanta or something, and I thought, oh, this is like lukewarm water. And obviously it was unbearably cold with ice and all that, and I was okay. The first time all day that I felt, oh, I'm half alive here, I'm all right. And I hopped out of the bath and that was it.
It wasn't until later that I found out that he'd sort of collapsed and was in very bad shape and had been rushed off the hospital. And that's when I started to think, oh my God, I've killed him.
I went into a ball because I was cramping that much and I just couldn't release. I was screaming to high hell that the pain in my back and the stomach, and just cramp right through your whole body. And obviously dehydration and set in, and then I got told later that obviously I went to ambulance to the Apollo hospital, and what happened there in the hospital and chaos and all that type of stuff, and they weighed me and that I lost 7 kilos in the day. I can't remember going to the hospital at all. And Errol Alcott, our Australian physio, tells a story that the ambulance was just amazing. One of the best rides you'll ever get anywhere. And we got to the Apollo hospital and of course I got wheeled in on a gurney or something, and I went into the emergency room and there was this one guy, Errol records, that surrounded, he's really badly injured. He's surrounded by nurses and doctors that are prodding and pushing him with all these type of stuff, and he's been hit by a bus evidently and he's mangled. And all of a sudden, someone says, Australian cricketer, dehydration, Dean Jones is here. And all of them just left this poor bloke and just looked after me. And Errol's gone, looked across, and there's this nurse just patting this poor bloke's hand, you'll be right. And he's got broken legs and ribs and cuts and all that. All I've got is dehydration. Because I was a cricketer, an Australian cricketer at that. They just looked after me.
I've got to take full credit for, his legendary status now. I mean, if he'd walked off, retired, hurt 170, mate, no legend. Now he's made 210 and nearly died. I mean, I'm responsible for that.
Dean Jones spent the night on an intravenous drip, but was fit to play the next day. Alan Border scored his 19th Test century and closed Australia's innings on a massive total of 7 for 574.
I think when somebody get 500 runs on the first day or second day, you're always on the back foot and try to say how we can save the Test match. It wasn't at that stage how we can win it, because the game was already gone out of our hands.
India began typically, with Chris Rickant in aggressive command, swatting Reid for 4 to bring up his 50.
I know only one way to play is play attacking. If I try different there, I'll be probably the first or the second over.
Greg Matthews recovered from an early pasting to lower the temperatures of the Indian supporters. He claimed Gavaskar for 8, caught and bowled. Then Shrikant, after compiling 53, was picked up at backward point by Greg Ritchie. Azharuddin chimed in with 50 himself, including some flowing shots. But he ultimately fell to Ray Bright, also caught and bowled. Matthews entered the third day with 4 for 86, enticing Shastri forward for Zura to take the catch. And Pandit lofted him to the comfortable hands of Steve Waugh at mid-on.
He's got this on mid-range. Tragedy for India.
At stumps on the third day, India was precariously placed at 7 for 270, still requiring another 104 runs to avoid the follow-on. India's fate rested on the shoulders of their captain, Kapil Dev.
We were in shambles at the end of that day's play, and Kapil was the overnight not out. And I think he was batting 10 or 15, and he got back in the dressing room and he was furious. He just sat us down and he just gave us an enormous lecture.
He said, hey, you guys think this is one-day cricket award? This is test cricket. We are facing follow-on, blah, blah, blah. All of us just got blasted.
Next morning, Steve opened the bowling, and the first 3 balls went up in the air, over mid-off, over cover point, and a flick over square leg, if I remember. Again, in the air, exactly the kind of shots that he had criticized us for us the previous evening. But that was Kapil.
Seven for 270 overnight and more than 100 to avoid the follow-on, but that didn't deter Kapil Dev. Only the wicket of Sharma provided relief for the Australians on what was a morning for Dev.
Does it again.
Kapil had the knack of playing these kind of innings when India needed them. With the kind of batting ability Kapil had, Kapil should have scored at least a couple more thousand runs. But then, bowling took a fair bit out of him. And my impression of Kapil when he went into bat was, if the runs were needed, he would score them.
He just came out with no fear and decided that everything was going to go. And in the meantime, he played some pretty decent cricket shots as well, which he was very capable of. And he scored at such a rate.
Anything I was hitting, it was just my day, I would say. And if I want to play against the spin, I could manage to do that. I can want to hit something, I can manage to do that. I think there are times of cricketers come in life when you want to do something, you can always do it.
On to his 4th Test 100 and, in the words of the locals,
Ecstasy. And that's his 100.
As only Kapil can do. Not scared to lift the ball in the air and just played all the shots, played it very well, played a very aggressive innings and started to sort of obviously save India's bacon.
Just listen to the reaction of the local crowd when Kapil Dev made sure that India avoided the follow-on.
That innings made the match. I mean, this match was a tight test match because of that innings, I feel, because if we hadn't got out of the follow-on, then probably the Australians would have won the game by the 4th day or the 5th day lunchtime. But it was that innings of Kapil's which was amazing.
The Australians wrapped up the Indian tail after they'd averted the follow-on. Yadav was caught by Border in close, but this was the man they needed earlier, Kapil Dev, who ultimately went for 119, falling to Matthews, who took 5 wickets. With a 177 lead, Australian intentions were positive, quick runs, and they lost wickets in achieving that. Marsh was one to fall defensively, out for 11. And first innings double century maker Dean Jones lacked the timing of his first knock. David Boone went unusually leg before. But the Australian runs flowed on to establish a sizable lead. Then Captain Alan Border played one out of the How Not to Bat manual.
Basically, overnight we're 5 for 170, which gave us a lead of 3-4-7. So that was